The road to becoming a BFDI finalist, or even reaching the late game, will always be a treacherous one. You gotta have enough spice to stand out and have support, without getting a target taped to your back, and there's only a few characters who've been able to reach the end. Many fall short, especially ones that are liked without having massive fan bases, but in an interesting twist of fate, Needle was able to go the distance, being just that. She for sure had fans, but for most of the show, Needle was stuck in a stagnant position of being underutilized and never achieved the level of popularity reached by some of her Season 1 peers. Her past is riddled with failure, but despite the tough competition in BFDIA, Needle never became hated and rose above her past to claw her way to the season's podium. So how'd she do it? How'd Needle beat the odds to outlast all but one of her BFDIA competitors? Well, that's what I'll be answering today, as I go through all of Needle's flame outs and flame ups over the years, because this is the redemption of Needle in BFDIA. We open with our low points, as we gotta know the scope of how underused Needle was before talking about redemption, starting in OG BFDI. You can instantly spot a problem for her in the first 2 episodes, because Needle feels pretty isolated from the rest of the cast. She's not in a friend group, she has no rivalries, she's not a villain, she's just a girl who blocky chucks at Bubble, who's also kinda good at challenges based on her Ninja Warrior skills. Now remember, this season was made by preteens, so I'm not, and nobody should be expecting Needle to be a complex, tragic, jaw-dropping, genre-defining character, but without having a clear archetype or big connections with anyone else, Needle's start isn't memorable, and she gets lost in the sauce of everyone around her, or at least she was, before gaining her defining gag in episode 3 that needs no introduction, especially since it literally takes over her personality for the rest of the season. You see, thanks to puberty, Carrie wasn't able to do the high-pitched voices of Needle and Ice Cube after episode 4, so they only speak in reused lines from then onwards in season 1. This made the needy joke become an integral part of Needle's character, which didn't solve her connections issue, but surprisingly wasn't a death sentence either, and it gave her something to stand out. However, she still got eliminated soon after, due to getting hella set up in BFDI 6. I mean, it's not as blatant as some later season 1 boots, looking at you, Tennis Ball and Ice Cube, but thanks to the temporary teams and teams format, the only peeps up for elimination were Coiny, Ice Cube, and Needle, in an episode where Coiny is really competent in doing the challenge without slapping Fiery at all, while Ice Cube and Needle are just kinda there. This left the 2 line reusers on the outskirts, and Needle simply wasn't as popular as Ice Cube, leading to her OG run being cut short. She really was dealt a shitty hand, cause in a season where you have Rocky and Ice Cube reaching the endgame, the needy joke could have totally carried Needle farther, had she not been put in this position at the final 15. In fact, having an iconic bit actually gave Needle a lot of post-elimination support, as she almost instantly comes back in the first BFDI rejoin vote, is in the top 3 of the second one, and places in the upper half of BFDIA's join vote. It didn't matter that she was basically a joke character now, because people liked the joke and wanted to see more of her in season 2. Plus, with a spot locked in BFDIA, you would think that the work Needle needed on her personality and dynamics would surely be done, except for the tiny issue that Needle was still trapped in reusing lines limbo at the start of the season. Like, damn, no one told me there would be a broken record-y competing, cause Needle starts to feel pretty repetitive and is not very interesting during these early episodes. I mean, what could she do? It'd be really hard to include her in any plot lines, or give her fresh interactions with Team No Name or WOAH Bunch when she has so few lines available, and I think her being stuck without a VA for an extended period of time contributed to her continued lack of focus, even after receiving a new one, which actually happens in BFDIA 5. Keiko Aang, I've never heard it said aloud before, sorry if that's wrong, voices Needle in the Journey to Yoyland Saga and IDFB 1, who lets us get crumbs of new Needle content for the first time in like 3 years. And now that she's being treated as more than just a needy machine, I should finally talk about what Needle's actual personality is. She's a very grounded character, despite revolving around a joke for so long, who's nice and friendly funny, with a mix of being fierce and fiery when working on WOAH Bunch. I wouldn't say she's a comedic foil, a la Jamie, Lollipop, or Tree, since she's perfectly fine with Pin using Coiny and Nickel to open the dollar cash money dimension without asking any questions, but Needle is a lot more composed and reeled in than her peers, unless you call her needy, along with having tons of motivation to win, which is a solid baseline to have in a competition show. Honestly, it's nice to see a glimpse of her true personality after it was buried by a running joke for so long, but unfortunately, she isn't given much screen time during her Keiko-Aang era, and that leaves me without anything else to talk about in pre-hiatus. This also means we'll be putting BFDIA on pause, cause now it's time for BFB, and wow, I hope you're starting to get a picture of just how little Needle was used, cause she gets barely anything this season. In terms of raw screen time, she's slumming in the same bottom of the barrel zone as Puffball, Pillow, and Foldy, which I'd say is a result of two main factors. The most apparent issue Needle runs into comes from her team, as she doesn't stand out on the losers at all. To be fair, she's not the only victim of the losers, like Coiny, Pin, and Loser himself steal most of the spotlight, but either way, Needle is rarely given the chance to interact with her fellow veterans, nor the BFB newbies. As for the second reason behind her low screen time, I suspect that Needle's lack of interactions was a consequence of her reusing lines for so many episodes. She does get a new voice actress in BFB, with Pokey starting to voice her in episode 2, but after getting stuck as a one-trick Poe needy for so long, BFB just doesn't care about expanding on Needle in a sea of 63 other characters. Like, think about if you were writing a show. Why focus on an old character and build her dynamics from basically the ground up when you have so many well-established OGs and a ton of newbies who you want to explore? Again, this reason is very speculative, but I think it, combined with her unbalanced team, adds up to a good theory of what led to Needle having no priority during these first 15 episodes. Legit, all she does is glaze Loser, do the challenges, and eat the RTX on cake before we get to a single scene that's of any note for Needle in all of BFB. It happens when the 4 is lava, where she snaps at Leafy while she's arguing with Fiery on the roof, telling her to shut up and do the challenge, before leading them both to 4. The moment is simple, but it shows Needle's competitive side with how her anger can bubble up during a contest, and it's surprising in a good way to see her take so much initiative when she's only been friendly and in the background for the past 14 episodes. Like, where the hell was this determination after Loser got eliminated and the team was in turmoil? She could have totally supported Pin and encouraged Cake in BFB 8's quiz challenge, and considering how Needle does earn her team the win in BFB 11 and 12's challenges, despite still not having much screen time, there was definitely room for her to receive more focus in pre-split. Any potential she had went sorely untapped though, to the point where in the BFB popularity poll, she has a not awful but pretty weak performance, placing 45th overall. Compared to the other losers, she only does better than Eggy and Mr. Dead for 4 episodes, and when stacked up against every season 1er, she's in the bottom 3 with Snowball and Eraser. Her decent level of BFDI and pre-hiatus support had now dried up and was replaced by a lukewarm indifference. Not hated, because she hardly had the chance to invoke much emotion at all. This right here is what I'd call Needle's low point, reduced from a joke character that people at least liked to becoming a non-factor, and personally speaking, I did not care about Needle in this era because she didn't give me a reason to. Outside of a single neat scene that doesn't happen until pre-split is basically over. Nevertheless, she did choose to swap over to TPOT during the split, and as a brand new season full of opportunities, there was certainly room for Needle to pick up steam again, unless of course something went terribly wrong.
Hey now, come on, stop fighting. We're teammates!
My god. Talk about unlucky. I've already talked about my thoughts on teammates in full, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much, but Needle is faced with the exact same issue she had to deal with on the losers, But instead of only like 3 characters getting good food, now everyone had to choke down the same meal served hot and fresh from the dumpster behind a Burger King. Okay, that might be a little harsh, cause while this team does genuinely frustrate me, I will admit that Needle is treated better on it than she was on the losers, because there is more than a single scene worth talking about during the 10 episodes teammates are together. In general, Needle's initiative during challenges is highlighted far more, like when she saws their block tower off Belle in TPOT 2, yeets Coiny and the magnet off the train so they can zip back to the canal in TPOT 5, and when she scraps up with Just Not below the balance beam in TPOT 8. Her days of being purely in the background were over, because she contributes a decent amount, and having cool moments despite her dour team helped Needle slowly break out of her indifferent reputation. After all, she had enough support to survive both vote wars her team was involved in, and through showing her attitude of being competitive and friendly far more often, I'd say my unimpressed opinion of Needle was steadily starting to turn around. I should mention that BFDIA coming back around this time was also a big help for her, but we'll get to that later, especially because we gotta tackle the familiar problems that Teapot leaves Needle to face. Her personality may be a lot more defined, but the choking smog of teammates made Needle's dynamics continue to be a weakness for her. I mean, the whole reason she joins is because Coiny is trying to reunite WOAH Bunch, and Needle hardly bonds with him or anyone on the team, and that makes her interactions with them real dry. Like, she's friends with them, and shows she cares through trying to save them during the zombie outbreak and worrying about Barf Bag, but compared to how tight-knit every character feels on teams like DPA and Are You Okay? Needle's connections on teammates are very shallow, which is a knock against her and everyone else on the team. That's enough hating on teammates though, because after a close shave with Coiny in Teapot 9, Needle is able to reach the team swap and is finally given the chance to make some fresh connections. She gets a decent role in Teapot 12, one that focuses on her competitiveness. She isn't exactly close or anything with anyone on Bagged, but as soon as Penn says he'll handle the physical stuff, Needle throws down with him, and they start a rivalry with each other. They're pretty fun as a pair, and stand out in what's low-key a mid-episode, and thanks to Marker, they start working with each other by the end, and it feels like the first real attempt at giving Needle a meaningful friendship. I also find her beating the shit out of Donut, despite how they're friends, and were literally on the same team 20 minutes ago, really funny. And intentional or not, it does hammer in how Needle is driven, and will throw hands with anybody when a challenge is on the line. Needless to say, this episode got a lot of people excited to see how Needle would continue to thrive on this new team, and while she was up for elimination, she definitely contributed more than TV and Bottle, so one of them was obviously gonna get booted, and Needle could stay in the limelight. That's not exactly what happened though, because when Teapot 13 rolled in, Tennis Ball, Pen, Basketball, and TV were all declared safe, leaving Needle in the bottom 2 against Bottle. Both gals had faced a bottom 2 before, but this time around, fortune favored the Bottle, and Needle was struck with a bolt of elimination. Suddenly, that flood of excitement transformed into a rush of outrage, because lots of people were pissed about this result. And while most of the blame went towards my GOAT TV, the real cause of Needle's elimination was her being overshadowed on a whole iceberg of levels. At the top we have Penn, who's always been super popular, and by pairing Needle with him, most voters who liked their rivalry chose to save him instead of Needle, assuming they'd both be safe, but picking Penn because Are You Okay was a memorable group that gave him far more chances to stand out. And speaking of pre-swap teams, in the middle we have teammates. There's a reason why Barfbag went out with Needle, along with Gady leaving the episode afterwards, cause teammates did a terrible job preparing any of its members for the team swap. Needle just lacked a plotline or any spice to draw people in beyond the rivalry, which was crucial to not be outclassed by her new and better prepared teammates. Needle's lack of preparation wasn't only because of Teapot though, because the bottom of and below our iceberg is Needle and BFB and everything before it. Due to not having a VA and fading into the background, she lacked a strong foundation, and that prevented her from gaining momentum to become super popular. It didn't matter that she was on the upswing, because on this fresh team, Needle had nowhere near enough diehard fans to excel in vote to save. One of these levels was bad enough, but combining all of them gives us the answer to what ultimately ended Needle's teapot run in ruin. Knowing the logic behind her elimination didn't make fans any less mad though, and IMO, I do think it's for the best that the wildcards of TV and Bottle stuck around, yet the anger that roared from Needle's elimination after a good showing made total sense. People were sad to see her story end in failure, snuffed out before she could thread any more dynamics between herself and the rest of Bagged. However, if we check on BFDIA post-hiatus, her story was anything but over. While in Teapot she's eliminated, lamenting how she tried her best but couldn't win, and then gets kidnapped by one, Needle in BFDIA was still having fun, getting along with the girls, secured a spot in the final 9, and was freshly in a sort of golden age. The clash between them is wild, and while I will discuss her future role in Teapot at the end of the video, let's flip back to what became Needle's last hope. If she went out early for a third time, her reputation would become forever stuck in the mud. There was a lot at stake for her, and there's a good amount of danger she faces throughout the season, but thankfully our story is one of redemption for Needle, and it all begins in BFDIA 6. Needle may not be a major part of this, and honestly the next 5 or so post-hiatus episodes, but I think Needle still deserves appreciation for how apparent her glow-up is, compared to the mere embers of personality she had in the BFDIA 5 saga. Needle is now a core part of the bunch, and seamlessly carries over her compassion and competitive edge that began to glimmer in Teapot. Again, she's not a major character yet, and these early episodes don't give me a lot to discuss, but moments like her sabotaging Team No Name and Freesmart with Yellowface's goofy-ah headphones, along with saying that they should use spaceship metal to make a new loser chamber in BFDIA 7, show that Needle is staying in a proactive role. To me, she's solid in this early patch of episodes, and I've always found it strange that online, and literally in the show, Needle gets called boring before she gets roped into Freesmart. Maybe she was getting overshadowed by her fellow bunchers to lots of people, but I think she's consistently likable and treated way better here than she had been in the past. A past we are unfortunately reminded of because I'd call episode 8 one of her few weak outings in post-hiatus. All she does is idle and toss Bommy off the Eiffel Tower, which does land her in the bottom 3 after WOAH Bunch loses, yet she receives nowhere near the amount of dislikes that Spongy and Yellowface were bombarded with. Say, remember at the start of the video where I called Needle a liked character? Well, these low dislike numbers are in fact the reason why, because while she may have fallen short in vote to save and got screwed in season 1, Needle is really good at surviving in vote to eliminate. Even back in pre-hiatus, nobody was saying, let's vote out Needle or Needle has gotta go, when there are still plenty of polarizing characters left to target. And as the BFDIA cast continued to shrink, Needle was rewarded with more opportunities to stand out, making her stay liked in the mid-game. Also yeah, BFDIA 9 brings us to the mid-game, and she bounces back from last episode by swapping voices with Coiny, which honestly doesn't matter that much, but it's kinda cool, along with surviving to the end of the challenge with Bommy. It's just another solid episode for her, but changing voices is nothing compared to BFDIA 10, because we get insane 200 IQ foreshadowing for Needle's incoming storyline. Just hear me out for a sec. In the newly formed Mega Team, she works with Nickel, the WOAH Buncher, and Pencil, the Freesmarter, to make ice cream posters, before being persuaded to get digging by Fries, the Freesmarter. This shit is crazy, and 1000% confirms that Carrie Huang is in fact a time traveler, because no way this is just a coincidence. Putting that aside, after the Mega Team loses, Needle is second safe when stacked up against everyone minus Fries. That's a great sign for the future, but unfortunately, again, in the present of our story, Needle has to deal with what I'd call the second least interesting episode for her in post-hiatus. It's less of a her problem and more of an IMO lots of mud is a mid-episode problem, because all Needle does is search for Flower's keys underwater, which isn't very exciting, and pales in comparison to the start of Needle's main plotline of the season next episode. It all starts after Ice Cube is eliminated, when Ruby gets Flower to jazz up TB's swap token. Pencil then decides that Needle would be the best pick to join Freesmart, so she's taken away from the Bunchers to join the Girl Squad. Now, Needle's had a couple chances to interact with Pencil and Ruby in the past, but now she hopes to build a good friendship with them in book and wants to be seen as a full member of the team. She does get unlucky with Book dying instantly and Pencil being brutalized in the bug hive, but Needle does succeed in befriending Ruby by taking out Coiny to show her commitment to her new team. This is the episode a lot of people call Needle's turning point in the season, the spot where she started to rise from okay to great, and I half agree with the sentiment. It is where her big plotline begins, but calling the episode a massive shift for her character, to me undervalues how, aside from episodes 8 and 11, Needle had already been really good. She's slowly been ramping up ever since TPOT, despite having to deal with a lame team, and now that we're in the final 11, the improvement Needle has had is finally starting to be noticed, alongside this new plotline for her. And after spending a non-competition episode recovering everyone and walking on a highway, she becomes even more noticed after enjoying one of her best episodes. You see, Pencil doubts that Needle actually became a full Freesmart member in BFDIA 12, and even Ruby, who knows that Needle proved herself, still sees her as the rookie and leaves her paired with a poisoned Pencil in the duo challenge. This puts a lot on Needle's plate, but what better way to prove that you're an awesome, rad, and valuable team member than some hype moments in Aura? Like, seriously, the whole reason why this is a banger Needle episode is because she gets to be cool while continuing to bond with Freesmart. She works quite well with Pencil, and seeing Needle easily fit in with WOAH Bunch and now Freesmart shows how malleable her character is, and gives us further proof that Needle would have shined if she was given a prominent position on a team like the Losers. Other than that though, there really isn't much to sit on with Pointy, as the reasons why Needle is great are super simple. So continuing on to Spore Day, we have more to discuss, with how the distance Needle has between her and WOAH Bunch is starting to take a toll. She's on the quasi-rhombi-cosi-dodecahedrons with Tennis Ball and Bommy, and as a buncher, Bommy is mad about Needle abandoning the crew, and she wants to earn his forgiveness. The fact that Pencil still doesn't consider Needle a full Freesmarter only adds to her stress, and real quick, I want to say that I love how this arc centers around Needle's friendliness and not her athletics. Both are traits that define her, but we've seen her challenge skills plenty of times, and by exploring how Needle wants to be included in Freesmart, yet also wants to stay chill with WOAH Bunch, we're now getting a lot of focus on Needle's dynamics, which for the longest time was not her strong suit. I do wish we got to see her interact with Bommy more, since their friction was interesting in this episode, but alas, he gets eliminated. Coiny kinda takes over his role of wanting Needle to be back on the bunch. Meanwhile, Needle is second safe and continues her streak of being in no danger, a streak that would be broken by BFDIA 16, cause man, this is a divisive outing for Needle. For this episode, there's no gimmick duos or trios, so she's forced to choose between Freesmart and WOAH Bunch, with her picking both and raising some red flags on her own safety. Now personally, I think this is a super fun role for Needle, and her playing both sides with the swap of a post-it note leads into really funny bits in a really funny episode, but there were definitely people who thought her two-team act was annoying. This was a bad time for negative press too, because now that we're in the final 8, people were almost out of polarizing characters to target, making Needle run the risk of becoming one herself. She also totally sells on the Freesmart side of things, and she's put up for elimination as a Freesmarter and WOAH Buncher in a completely unique situation. There wasn't any clarification on anything, and from the mist of mystery, a risky train of thought chugged through a lot of people's heads. If one version of Needle gets eliminated, what'll happen? I kinda wanna know, so dislike. This thought process, along with those people who got annoyed with Needle in the episode, put Needle Freesmart in a battle with Pencil that, by the end of the voting period, was too close to call with the dislike extension. Now, people didn't know for sure at the time, but it was confirmed at a meetup that Needle would have been eliminated for realsies if she got the most dislikes, and if she did get taken out here, I know the outcry would have been a goddamn nightmare. But fortunately for Needle and the fanbase, she didn't get the most dislikes. Pencil was eliminated instead, leaving Needle in the game, but still in a rough spot. The only other characters left in the final 7 who had been in a bottom 2 before were Pin and Fries, and Needle joining that list didn't bode well for her endgame prospects. You see it a lot in vote to eliminate object and regular competition shows, where once someone gets votes or is in danger, the odds of it happening again go way up, and Needle still had a rebound from her mixed reception last episode, which is a tough task, and to be honest, BFDIA 17 doesn't start a shift for her, despite having some good stuff. Book plainly points out how being on 2 teams almost got Needle eliminated, and tells her to pick a side, or rather, her side. But when Needle gets pulled from all sides, she gets sick of people-pleasing, and joins Fries as the one person not vying for her. Their dynamic is okay, but potential hot take incoming is nothing special, cause Fries equally doesn't care about anyone left in the game, and because he picked immunity as his prize, the 2 of them on Freesmart are given the least amount of focus. The scene of Needle reflecting, and how she enjoyed being on all of her past teams, and can't decide on what to do is nice, and shows her thought process. But again, every other team gets more attention than her, and come the end of the episode, she's up for elimination, remaining in that tough spot. Her odds were helped by Nickel having a lot of heat on him for indirectly causing TPOT 15 to happen, but he wasn't malicious about it, and considering his recent boost in popularity, I thought there was a small, but real chance that he'd survive over Needle. And come BFDIA 18, the vote was indeed pretty close with Nickel and Needle in the bottom 2, but Needle survived, and no shade to Nickel, he was really fun this season, but it's good that she did because this episode is another one of her best. We've unofficially merged, so Needle doesn't have to deal with teams anymore, and this freedom gives Needle an answer to her internal conflict as she stares into the sky. For the first time all game, she's not on a team, she's playing for herself, and after Coiny gloats about how he's about to win, and him winning is like the whole bunch wins, she claps back and embraces her independence. Now, first and foremost, shout out to whoever storyboarded / animated / cleaned up the shot of Needle on the tower, cause not only is it very pretty, but through some hyper-analysis, I think it shows how, by no longer being on a team, Needle is free from all that self-pressure, and can admire the distance between herself and her competition by gazing at the lights of their beacons. That, or maybe the curtains are just blue, IDK. Point is, Needle's character growth here is great. Seeing her reach this conclusion on her own is fitting, and the flow between Needle's reflection but failure to reach an answer while on a team with Fries, to finding an answer as a solo is very smooth, and honestly I'd say her low screen time last episode was a necessary cooldown, knowing that she wouldn't get eliminated and would start reaping the crops of her storyline in this episode. Beyond her development though, Needle plays off her fellow Final 6 nicely in the Beacon Challenge, and while she didn't win immunity, she did succeed at shifting the target off her back. I mean, talk about a second wind, because despite still getting more dislikes than Coiny and Book, this vote mirrors BFDIA 9, as she's far away from Tennis Ball and Fries, officially earning her spot in the final 5. Calling this the endgame feels appropriate, and with Tennis Ball starting to become a target, and Pin burning all her win equity in the past few episodes, a path to the end for Needle was surprisingly possible, even with the popularity of her remaining peers. I figured she'd be screwed if she was up for elimination against, say, Coiny and Book, but TB and Pin gave her some breathing room that she might have needed, because now that Needle is playing for herself, she's noticeably less personable in this episode. From hoping Tennis Ball gets eliminated, which sparks a pretty major beef between them, to getting snippy with Book about how she sucks at challenges, and even Leafy questions her resolve by mentioning that Needle is pushing everyone away and won't be at her best when she's all alone. Needle's not out of character, but she is a bit volatile and headstrong due to operating on the opposite extreme of not wanting any support instead of trying to be accepted by everyone. We don't go farther than beating around the bush in this episode, but these are hints to where Needle's character will go, and now she's guaranteed to place around farther, cause she don't care that her spine is shattered, and clutches individual immunity in part 1. This puts her in the back seat for BFDIA 20, but she stays relevant by picking who goes in and out of the danger zone. We get a clear picture of how Needle feels about everyone else. being friends with Book, neutral, probably leaning negative right now towards Pin, on good terms with outside the game but bad inside with Coiny, and actively beefing with Tennis Ball. Said feud with Tennis Ball has gotta be my favorite dynamic, like their banter is super fun, and I love how Needle's level-headed logic is so at odds with Tennis Ball's worry, as he goes from playing dirty to groveling and saying he'll do whatever she wants in order to avoid the danger zone. It's an offer she accepts, and since she's friends with Book, Needle raises her karma by giving her an immunity ticket right before time is up, meaning she's got a friend and foe sticking around in the final four. There is a non-competition episode first, but Needle is not very important, even if it is nice to see her try to comfort Coiny about him betraying Pin last episode. Again, her issues with him are all game related, so of course she'd see if he was doing alright between rounds, but once the flag challenge starts, she's back to playing on her own. Needle is at about her same level of recent goodness, with some volatility in BFDIA 22, but damn, it's crazy how backloaded this episode is, because outside of enforcing her deal with Tennis Ball, there is nothing specific to talk about until the last 9 minutes. This is a crucial time frame, as they're what people will have fresh in their heads when voting, and in Needle's case, it's pretty interesting to talk about. Firstly, when Woody is one step away from falling off the highway to his doom, Needle chooses to not send him there, while Coiny gladly does. She then wishes Pin luck in trying to save Woody, and wow, Needle is being really nice, until she shoves Coiny in the lava to have a fun reunion with Pin's charred corpse, before getting betrayed by Tennis Ball. So yeah, this episode is a morally mixed bag for Needle, and what's worse is that she's up for elimination against Coiny and Book, which I saw as a deadly scenario for her. This was the second time she was involved in a vote where only 3 peeps could be eliminated, and seeing how Needle had already danced with danger twice this season, I spent the 4 months between episodes expecting history to repeat itself. And in a way, history did repeat itself, but the repetition did not end Needle's story, because Coiny was eliminated with a difference of 1,269 dislikes. This shocked me when the episode dropped, and I'm still shocked now, but when thinking back on BFDIA 22, I feel like the Woody Bridge moment, plus his betraying of Pin in BFDIA 20, are what made the difference between Coiny and Needle in this vote. He had become slightly more dislikable than her, which put Needle one challenge away from the finale, and by the end of the episode, her odds of taking one of those 2 spots were looking very nice. I've talked about the scene with Needle and Pencil before in my final challenges vid, but it really is a great one for Needle that makes her realize that the extreme of not wanting help from anybody and pushing people away isn't good either. You gotta have some balance. And while she spends the first 2/3 of the episode trying to go solo, she mellows out towards the end by doing Pin's mini challenge and making a truce with Tennis Ball to take down Woody. It's the epilogue of her development, and because of that, I'd call this episode the climax of Needle's journey to redemption, because look how far she's come. Needle had gone from practically a joke character, to stumbling in BFB and TPOT, to slowly picking up speed, to becoming a likely 4th placer, and now a likely finalist, after a season full of highs. I'd also say this episode is a climax for her because BFDIA 24 is definitely a cooldown episode for Needle character-wise, even if there are still lots of things to compliment. Once she gathers all the WTFers minus Spongy to help bake the cake soon to be at stake, Yellowface and Coiny point out basically what I just said. She wasn't anyone's closest ally, but she was nice to everyone and helped them out at least once during the game, with the exception of Donut, who she did make up for in Teapot before that one time where she whooped his ass. Outside of that reflection though, Needle stays her fun to watch self during the baking process, and caps off the episode with one last hype moment in a fight with Eva Leafy before defeating Tennis Ball in the final 3 vote to officially join Book in the final 2. This was what it all came down to. I was hoping for a Needle win, but I was also fine with Book winning, which I wouldn't call a popular take, given how tense the Book versus Needle versus Coiny should have won the season versus Fry should have won the season debates were between, say, Hijack and the finale. Looking back, they do show us in a way how Needle had gotten popular enough to fuel some toxic discourse, but ignoring the arguments, let's talk about how Needle and Book work together as a final two. I really appreciate how thanks to Freesmart, they have an interesting rapport starting around BFDIA 16, with how they are friends and share a connection as fellow alternates, but because Needle's eyes are locked onto the prize, she's also had some friction with Book across the season. Oh, and like with the Needle is boring as a WOAH Buncher take, I disagree with the propaganda that this final two was a lame friendship finale, because, no? It may be rosy between them outside the game, or when Needle's immune like in BFDIA 20, but in the competition they argue. They're not pulling any punches, and they are far more interesting than a pair like Gelatin and Flower who didn't have any kind of unique dynamic until literally the second to last episode. That's a different tangent though, because no matter whose side you were on, it would all be revealed in this last episode, so let's get into it. She Deserves This Before the Big Reveal is very similar to last episode for Needle, with how she's running with a bunch of characters to catch Fiery. I like her leading the chase, although I'm not a fan of the line in the tower where she says,
"I don't care about the winning for myself thing anymore, that was dumb!"
because it kinda feels like the show is undercutting Needle's independence. Like, Needle learned that she should have balance, aka working with people and on her own, so Needle casting aside one of those pieces doesn't sit right with me. If we ignore that one line though, she is yet again engaging to watch during the whole chase, and seeing her learn that Fiery secretly cares about Leafy makes her interaction with them in BFB 14 fun to think back on. What isn't fun to think back on, if you were rooting for her to win, is that Needle fell about 10k votes short of Book and ended the season as the runner-up. Again, I was chill with either of them winning, and now that I've had time to let Needle's loss simmer, I'm still okay with it, because I could celebrate how this was Needle's best season by a country mile. It made me really like her, and I already expected and would have been happy to see Needle get 4th place, so 2nd is even better. She ends the season proud of her game too, glad that her fellow Freesmart Final Four friendo won, and concludes her runner-up story by swinging her way to IDFB. With that, her journey is over, and now that we've reached the end, it's time to talk about Needle's overall character and where she could end up next. Looking back on Needle's aimless early days compared to today, it's crazy how much Needle's BFDIA successes make up for her past failings at being interesting. She's come a long way, and I have very little to complain about or suggest with BFDIA Needle, as the season addressed and fixed all her major problems. She got connections, she had character growth, her nice yet competitive personality was cemented, and with 55% of voters saying she's amazing, Needle is the highest rated character I've ever polled for a solo video. She's not without critics, like I've seen the take that her development feels forced, but really the only stuff I'd personally get her on are that winning for myself was dumb line, a couple weak episodes, and although she has good relationships, I would have liked to see her have more interactions with Bommy or Pin, because of how they're linked in the future. Aside from that though, I'm super satisfied with Needle and BFDIA, but on the topic of her and Bommy, things get a lot less kind if we're just looking at the TPOT side of modern Needle. It's easy to forget seeing how I spoke about TPOT however many minutes ago, but getting shackled to teammates and having a solid episode on Bagged before getting eliminated is not a good run that only looked decent compared to BFB and backwards. Needle literally power crept herself, to the point where she's been trying to get some extra credit points through getting kidnapped by one after her teapot elimination. We've seen flashes of Needle trying to be the leader of the kidnapped crew, however none of these scenes have been all that memorable to me. I guess knowing that the Defeat 1 trilogy is going to involve 3, who Needle and co have just started searching for, means that she could have a cool moment coming soon, but as of now, Needle is very much carried by her BFDIA performance. Said performance is again really strong, and keeps Needle as a great character in my eyes, but I'd hate if she faded into obscurity and was stuck without ever reaching similar highs again. Knowing Fiery's secret should hopefully give her a big role in IDFB, yet no matter what else the future holds for Needle, I'd like her to ride her BFDIA wave of success and remain a semi-relevant and well-liked character. She wouldn't be the first finalist to become a reoccurring face outside the game, But even if time is cruel to Needle, and she becomes dormant, the legacy of her BFDIA redemption will still shine a bright silver. That's all I gotta say. If you haven't, please subscribe, like, hype, share, hit that bell, comment if you have any thoughts, and thank you for watching.